Well, good morning, everyone. If you can take your seats, we would appreciate it. We're going to get going right here on time. My name is Wade Crowfoot, and I serve as our Natural Resources Secretary, and I help to lead this meeting of the Oroville Citizens Advisory Commission. Believe it or not, this is our 16th commission meeting, so huge thanks to our commissioners and to everybody, including our consultants, Kearns and West, that makes these meetings possible. As everybody knows, this commission is a public forum, specifically providing our commissioners, leaders from around the region, as well as community members, important information and updates as it relates to Oroville, dam safety, and associated topics. Big thanks to our commissioners today who helped to shape this meeting's agenda and shape really all of our meeting's agenda. It's great to see everybody in person here at Oroville. You know, we were in person early on, and then the pandemic hit, and then we were online, and now we're really in a hybrid format. We plan to hold the next two commission meetings virtually, which will be helpful, meeting the governor's order to minimize transportation costs given our budget forecast. We have a full agenda today, as always, but I want to start with some housekeeping items. First of all, this meeting will be recorded and posted on the website for the commission, so know that. As always, we track items that we discuss in the action tracker, thanks to our consultants. So everybody after each meeting receives an updated actions tracker, providing an update, a status of actions that were committed to by our various departments based on each meeting. So you should have received that after the last meeting, and then we'll update that and provide that to everybody after this meeting. Before we begin the content of our discussion, we're going to ask our colleague Tara to do a roll call, and then we're going to do a Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Secretary. Okay. So I'm going to read the name of each commissioner. If you're an alternate attending in their place, please state your name clearly for our note taker. Thank you. Commissioner Bateman.
Here.
Supervisor Conley.
Here.
Supervisor Conant.
Present.
Secretary Crowfoot.
Here.
Senator Dolly. Sergeant Evans.
Here.
Supervisor Furr. Assemblymember Gallagher.
Julia Cordy.
Thank you. Deputy Director Najura.
Here.
Supervisor Kimmelshoe.
Here.
Deputy Lycan. OES Manager Marin. Supervisor McKelly. Director Namath.
Here.
Mayor Pittman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Smith. Matt Teague.
Here.
Lieutenant Spear. Lieutenant Commander Stokes.
Mark McNabb for Lieutenant Stokes.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a quorum of 12 commissioners.
Thanks so much, Tara. So let's stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, first of all, thanks to Assemblymember Gallagher, my co-chair of this commission, and Julia, thanks for representing the Assemblymember here today. And of course, always want to also express our thanks to Senator Dolly and his staff who helped to shape these meetings. Before we get into today's agenda, I also want to now welcome our newest member, Sutter County Supervisor, Nick McKelly. It sounds like Supervisor McKelly's not here, but we're excited that he is joining our commission. At a prior meeting, commissioners expressed an interest in better understanding from our Department of Water Resources team how DWR selects and prioritizes Oroville facility projects for funding. There's obviously a lot of work that gets done year in, year out at the facility, and so there was a desire to really understand how DWR decides and prioritizes which projects it works on, as well as an interest in providing a forecast of expenditures for the state water project activities at Oroville. So much of our meeting today will be a presentation on that. The presentation is designed to provide insight into the process that DWR uses to analyze risk, identifying the projects to limit or reduce those risks, and then plan the implementation of those projects to maximize overall public safety. Our goal here today is to walk away with a better understanding of how DWR is continuously assessing, analyzing risk and its investments at Oroville to maximize safety. Commissioners also expressed an interest in emergency operations. In other words, what's the emergency planning? And huge thanks to our leaders of our first responders in the region for being part of this commission. Today we'll hear from Lori at the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Think about that as our statewide FEMA. And Lori will run through some important information around how we tackle emergency planning and operations. And then lastly, as always, we want to reserve time for public comment, and so we'll do that. Just a word that for commissioners, when you're making comments, please speak loudly and clearly into the microphone. This meeting is recorded and also parts of it are transcribed, so it's important that everybody can hear us through the microphone. So before we get into the presentations today, as always, we'll ask for commissioner updates, and we always start those commissioner updates with an update from Director Carla Namath, who of course leads our Department of Water Resources. Over to you, Carla.
Thank you. Good morning, Secretary, and it's good to see everyone here in person. A quick update on our weather conditions, which, it's a pretty narrow bandwidth when I can say they feel, I don't even want to tempt fate, but they feel kind of perfect, in as much as we have a significant snowstorm coming in. It's nice and cold. We anticipate a real increase in snowpack, which of course is essential to water supplies for California. So we started this year with our reservoirs a bit above average, given the tremendous precipitation last year. We then moved into a very dry late summer and fall, and we saw those conditions kind of deteriorate. But now we are heading up to, we're a little bit over our average for this year in Oroville, about 132%. We're at about 84% capacity. We do have these incoming storms. We are, as everyone here in this community knows, we have been releasing flood flows to make sure that we have space for those incoming inflows as a result of the storms. So as a general matter, our system is looking pretty healthy. We did just complete our March 1 snow survey. We held it on Leap Day to make sure everyone was safe with the weather we anticipated in the Sierra today and tomorrow. And so all of that information, all of those improved conditions, we anticipate to be able to reflect over the course of the next couple of months in improved water supplies. I do want to provide a quick update on some of the work that we've been doing with the Corps of Engineers. But before I do that, I wanted to acknowledge Laura Hollander. She is our acting Deputy Director for Flood at the department. She replaces Gary Lipner, who left that position in December. Laura she's an attorney by training, but she has been attached to the flood part of our department for more than a decade as a policy advisor and as an operational person. So knowing how critical those issues are to this community, I wanted to take a moment and just introduce you to Laura, because you'll be seeing more of her. As far as the Corps of Engineers, we did have that terrific presentation last time about the water control manual. Ms. Fromm reports she did receive comments from Commissioner Bateman, and I'm sure he'll give us an update on those. But as a general matter, Ms. Fromm anticipates having a draft of that control manual available this summer. that will incorporate the pilot study on the Yuba feather. That includes our forecast-informed reservoir operations, but that's the general timing that we'll hear back from the Corps. They have not yet decided on the environmental review process that needs to accompany that effort, so presumably we'll have an update from them on that key piece of their effort over the summer as well. So those are my updates, Secretary, and I'll pass it back to you.
Big thanks, Director Namath. And as many of us know, but to ensure everybody does, the Army Corps of Engineers Flood Control Manual is really the set of guidelines and the rules that determine how the reservoir is operated to maintain flood safety. And so there's an important decadal update that's underway right now. So that's a great segue into asking if there are commissioner updates, and I might call on Commissioner Bateman for an update on the discussion with the Army Corps given. Big thanks, Commissioner, for diving even deeper than we were able to in our last meeting with the Corps on the flood control manual.
Is this on?
It is.
It is. As you know, the water control manual hasn't been updated since 1970. At the last meeting, we did submit questions we'd prepared for the Corps, and we sent them on to them. The questions were circulated to commissioners, but if we missed anyone, please let me know. We got an immediate reply, which is very encouraging, and expected answers this week. But earlier in the week, we were told that the answers would be delayed because they needed careful consideration. This would seem to be a good sign, because at least they're taking them seriously, and we'd much sooner get a detailed reply than just a superficial one. We're seeking a stakeholders meeting with the Corps to be held a few weeks after we get these answers. The stakeholders should be before the Corps begins the NEPA review process, when the conclusions will already have been formulated. The DWR has been involved in the review process, and it's reasonable to assume that the state water contractors have been consulted. But to date, no downstream stakeholders have been, and our primary focus is, of course, safety. The rules set out in the Water Control Manual are critical to safety. Among other things, they will determine the space in the reservoir left at any time for future inflows. There are questions about how the existing manual deals with safety or risk. The uncontrolled floods in 86 and 97 and 2017 must in part have been caused by inadequacies in the rules. We know a lot about the 2017 flood, but no careful analysis of the causes of the 1997 flood has been published, and the only information about the 1986 flood that I've heard or seen is anecdotal. It'll be difficult to form valid opinions about the revisions to the manual without good information about the causes of these floods, and I believe Matt Mentnick is going to mention that later. One thing seems certain: inaccuracies in estimating snowmelt runoff was a major factor in both 1997 and 2017. This is one of the things we are making sure is addressed in the revisions. With well-considered rules and a flexible approach to modern forecasting, it should be possible to have a safer dam and deliver more water in future. The chance of this happening will be much higher if downstream stakeholders get involved in the process of revising the Water Control Manual. The group we are forming already includes commissioners, these commissioners of this commission, the CNA ad hoc committee members of the Oroville Recreation Advisory Commission, emergency planning officers, and directors of flood control agencies. We're seeking other stakeholders, particularly representatives from farming, to join us at any stakeholder meetings with the Corps. Can commissioners and anyone else here please get in touch with me or Bill Connolly if you know of any people or agencies that would like to attend a meeting with the Corps, probably in April. This will be to see whether our objectives coincide with the objectives in the manual. The revisions to the Water Control Manual will be critical to reducing the risk of floods and evacuations that have happened too often in the last 55 years. Thank you.
Commissioner Bateman, thank you. And I'll just underscore your request that if there are members of the public or leaders that want to be part of this meeting that you and Supervisor Connolly are convening, it sounds like in April, then they should reach out to you. Are there other commissioner updates? And welcome, Mr. Ross, on behalf of Senator Dolly.
I'll make a quick comment.
Okay,
if I
yes,
may.
please.
Yeah, welcome to Oroville. I'm the mayor, and we hope that your visit here is wet and full of rain. as a nice compliment. I need to introduce our new city administrator, Brian Ring. He's right there, raised his hand. He came to us from the county of Butte, and he used to wear nice wingtip shoes. Now he's wearing running shoes. He's finding out that it's a little more work here. I also want to compliment the Powerhouse staff. We have so many new employees and department heads at the city of Oroville that we've got a great tour of the Powerhouse so that they have a perception of what's going on in the Powerhouse. If you haven't been through there, you don't know what that is. So I appreciate that. We had a recent tour, and it was a great familiarization for the city to have understand the Powerhouse, because it is underground, and unless you've been there, you don't know what you're talking about. I also want to compliment Ted, and as the runoffs occur, I get a daily report and text message, and that is extremely different than the past. I've been around a while, and back in the days we didn't know what was going on with the lake and the runoff. So DWRs reach out to us as a city as the first one to hit the high water flows. It's a very good thing to have, and we disseminate that through Brian, through all our different agencies, our sewer plant, and everybody, because it all has a factoring effect. So again, I want to thank you, Ted. Appreciate those text messages. No matter what time of day they are, I get them, and then I disseminate those. So that's a great, I think, accolade to this process here, this committee process, that we're all communicating and we're getting that information where it needs to happen, and especially to the boots on the ground. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Mayor, thank you so much. And that will be one, just for the action tracker to make sure that we institutionalize that communication so that, regardless of who's mayor and, who's in charge of the State Water Project, that communication's taking place. I also want to thank Carla's, our Director and Amos team, for the newsletter that gets put out. If you're not getting this internet newsletter from the commission on Oroville updates, let us know, or you can go on the website and sign up for that, because that's also helpful too. I check that out on a monthly basis. So we're going to hear, I think, anybody else on commissioner updates? All right. We're going to get into the meat of the discussion here today, and it involves 3 presentations. The first one is from our colleague John Yarborough at Department of Water Resources. He'll give us an overview of how the agency plans and prioritizes risk reduction and flood safety projects. Then we'll hear from Hong Ling, who will provide an overview of the forecasted expenditures of the State Water Project at Oroville. And then we'll hear from our colleague Lori at Cal OES more about emergency preparedness and planning as it relates to Oroville. John.
All right, well, thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Commissioners, and try to get adjusted here. All right. All right,
And
well, hey,
I should say for John and Hong and Lori's presentation, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions for each presentation.
all right, and green moves us forward here, so, okay, there we are. Well, thank you, everybody. So, John Yarborough, Assistant Deputy Director for the State Water Project, and as the Secretary mentioned, we had, as a commission, has provided questions along the lines of how does the Water Project select the projects we do, how do we do our planning? We've talked a lot about how we use risk to inform our thinking, but really wanted to get into a little more detail on exactly how that works and how we make these decisions. Start my timer here too. So for an agenda for this presentation, want to get into that a little more detail on how we make these decisions, how we select projects, and then also have our Chief Dam Safety Engineer, Dave Sarkeesian's here with me. And so after I go through kind of the high level of the process, then Dave's going to come and walk through 3 different examples of some dam safety projects that we've talked to the Commission about before, talk about how we prioritize those, and so use the process I'm going to lay out to walk through where we land with those projects. At the outset, just want to say there's a lot that goes on when we do our planning. It's it's a big project. There's a lot of different complicated pieces, a lot of different types of expertise that have to work on the work we do. And so really not going to get into that level of detail, really trying to give a high-level sense so at least the commission has an understanding of our approach. So to start with, when we talk about how we select our activities, a couple of key points. And the first is, when we think about the work we do, we think about the work we're doing here in 2024. A lot of this work, really the thinking about it, the planning started years in advance. And so it's a multi-year process that leads up to arriving at the work we're going to do. The second point is that each year we're not just thinking about what we're doing right now, what we're going to do next year. We're thinking out years in advance. And so this is an ongoing process that we're almost constantly throughout the year looking at our work plans and reprioritizing, making sure that we're doing the right work to get the best results from our use of resources. And so just laid out a timeline here and really focusing on, okay, for 2024, the work we're doing this year, how did we get to that point? Started years earlier with a lot of this work, identifying where we have risks, where we have projects that we want to implement. And so we're starting to scope out what would those projects look like, what are we trying to achieve, what are we trying to accomplish, and then looking at what are the resources, what are the different skill sets we're going to need to do that work. As we get to 2 years ahead of time, so 2022, we started developing our initial detailed plan where we're prioritizing work, we're detailing out the schedule for how that work's going to occur and assigning resources to it. We then go through and we revalidate and we revise that plan the year in advance. So in 2023, we were finalizing the work plan for this year. And then we end up in this year, so we're doing the work. This is our planned work, and of course there are things that happen that we didn't plan for, so as we're going through the year, we'll be doing an inspection and we'll find some piece of equipment that we say, hey, we'd really rather replace that right now and supposed to wait and plan it out for years in advance. So we'll have unplanned work that we have to jump on right away. And then there'll be emergencies. So last year, we had a lot of flood emergencies through the state. A lot of our state water project engineers went to support those efforts. And so that wasn't an activity that we'd planned for, something we have to adjust in the year there. So that leads to, again, the work that we do, it's a mix of what we've been able to plan for and these unplanned emergencies and events there. Getting into just a little more detail here then, so, there's kind of a lot here, but the main point is this planning, this looking at our plan, set of activities that is occurring throughout the year. And the second point I want to make is I think one of the questions we received from the commissioner was, well, who's making these decisions? Who is the person that's assessing risk and prioritizing? And so I want to answer that by saying that, so in July, we start really at a project level. So it's our project managers, it's our program managers are taking a first cut at looking at what are the projects that they see needing to happen, what's the biggest risks they're seeing in their program areas, their projects. Whoops, that wasn't me. What's the biggest risks they're seeing? So across the water project, we have over 100 different programs, so it's really at this level, we're taking this first cut at looking at what is the work that needs to be done, and then we go to the next level up, which is we have within the water project 100 programs. Those are grouped into 7 different division and offices. So it's at that division office level, then we're looking at coming up with a common set of priorities across all of the different programs. And so that's an opportunity for us to levelize, because we have 100 different people doing some assessments, so you're going to have differences in how people look at things. So by bringing it up to that next layer, lets us come up with a common levelized approach there. And then by the time we get to October, we're coming up with a draft plan that then we reprioritize across the whole water project. So as we're reprioritizing, what we're looking at is where we've identified our larger risks, making sure we do have activities that are addressing those risks, making sure that we have a kind of a common sense of assessing risks across all the different programs. And so then that leads to December. We ultimately end up with a work plan that's for the next year and for the following year, which is approved by our deputy director. So that's the end approval of the plan. And then after December, then we start implementing, but also communicating this out. So the communicating the plan happens in a couple of different ways, several different ways. So one is we call it our Bulletin 132, and this is basically the process where we send bills out to our customer agencies, to the water contractors. So this work plan then, the expenditures needed to implement it, that's what we're going to build to the contractors. So we're communicating this work plan, all this work to our water contractors. We also present to the California Water Commission a view of here's the work we're doing in the upcoming year. And then we also, these meetings right here is how we're, if the commission recalls, but previous meetings we've had, I think David Duvall, our past operations manager, would give an overview of here's the different projects we're doing in Oroville. That's coming out of all of this process, how we're communicating the work we're doing out externally. So when we say planning, a couple of points here on what's happening here with these project managers, program managers that we're rolling up. So we're starting with what we call our annual activities, and this is the regular ongoing maintenance that we're going to do every year. And so we start there as that is a baseline of that ongoing work we do every year. We start there, then we're going to layer on additional projects that we have identified and have prioritized. And a project could be a construction project where we're constructing something. It could be a study where we're analyzing something better to get a better sense of how much risk is there or isn't. It could be the design work that's leading up to a construction project. So a variety of different activities with what we would call a project. So we're defining, again, what the scope is, what exactly we're doing, and we're identifying what all are we going to need to accomplish that work there. And I thought I had one more slide in between there, but nope, I didn't, so we'll keep going. So for prioritizing, we're using these concepts of risk, and we're looking at asset management, and those principles as another guide for what we're doing here. And so when we talk about risk, I want to start with this figure here, and so this table is sort of a lot going on in here. So I kind of wanted to walk through what's going on in this table, because again, this idea of using risk and this table communicating what we see as being risk really guides how we're going to do a lot of this prioritization. So table matrix up on top there, we've got the different rows are how likely something could break there. How likely could that be? And up at the very top there we have something 10 times in a year. So this is like the batteries in your flashlight. It's high likelihood that that's going to fail in a year, all the way down to something that we're saying is, in 10 million years you wouldn't expect this to fail. So a big range of how likely is something going to break. Going across the different columns then is that what are the consequences of this thing breaking? So your flashlight breaking, really not a lot of severe consequences with that. So very likely, but not that big of a problem compared to something like a failure of a dam. So very unlikely. This would plot down in the lower right corner there. So big consequences. So we're looking at our facilities, looking at the different parts of the system, and using this kind of thinking here to place our risks, to plot them so we can compare them. So we do this for a handful of reasons, and part of this is just so internally we can, across different divisions, different groups, different organizations, we can talk about in one program where we're seeing an issue that we're going to want to work on, how that compares to somewhere over in a different program, so we can have those conversations on, well, if this breaks, well, how bad is that? How is that compared to this over here? How likely are those? So it gives us a framework for us to compare what we want to start working on. Down on the bottom there are different, we call them our consequence categories, and so these are the different, as we're thinking about, well, how bad could what's the consequence? Why is it bad if something fails? We're looking at these different categories, and on the next slide, I've got more in words what the gradations are in the categories. But basically, we're looking at public safety. We're also looking at the financial impact to, and that's not the DWR, that's to the community at large downstream. Personnel safety, the compliance to different regulatory rules, our ability to make water deliveries. The other purposes would be like our ability to generate power, and then reputation is one that we also put on there. Just again, is making sure that community has trust in DWR, is confident in what we're doing. So we're not wanting to do something that's going to cause people to really question our ability to operate the project. One of the questions we got was, well, how do we think about water supply and that ability to deliver water compared to something like public safety? And so part of the answer is in how we assess, how we score these risks. So when we look at public safety, the numbers we use, right, are much larger. The things that we're going to plot over is on the far right is our largest risks. Really, it's public safety is what's the only thing that's going to drive risks over that far. So when we look at water supply, really we're, to use the numbers on our table there, a 5 is the biggest score we give a water supply impact. Compared to dam safety, we could really go way out much further. So that mechanically is how this, we're saying public safety is most important to us. And this is sort of how that works behind the scenes there. Of public safety is really what's going to drive these greatest risks. It's going to make things appear over in that furthest part of the figure. Let's see. That was the slide I thought was earlier. This is the consequence category. So this is then in words than what these different categories are. And so public safety, again, it's looking at ranging from injuries all the way to fatalities, to large number of fatalities. The guidelines here, what we're using, a lot of this is really informed by work that's been done by the federal government. So this isn't really work that DWR is doing and that we're saying this is the right score here, this is the wrong score. We're really relying on work that the federal government has done, and then FERC, through its dam safety rules, are requiring us to use. Some of this is, public safety is pretty, set numbers there. But looking at this, a lot of this is very subjective here. Looking at some of like compliance on, assessing what kind of, what would happen if we weren't able to comply with a different requirement. Reputation is one that is really very subjective. And so I think the takeaway here is that not to think of these as, a black and white line, that this is a math exercise. This is really what we're giving our staff and what we're using to have this conversation around what's worse, what's not worse, because different folks are going to think about some of these subjective things very differently, but at least we have a way to start talking about, this is why I think this is more severe than this other topic there. So, wanted to then, since risk is such an important part of how we do the prioritization, wanted to just use a couple of examples here of how we've used risk to prioritize and what doing a project has done. And as I do that, one of the other features of the figure here then is noting the different colors. So we have the red and the yellow and the green. And again, this is based on those dashed lines there, and the dashed lines is really what we get from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission as their guidelines for what they call a tolerable risk versus a non-tolerable risk. So that's really where we've gotten these differentiations between the different colors. And what we're, again, looking for is when we see an issue and it's plotting up in the upper right, it's in the red, we're wanting to prioritize those risks. We want to prioritize work to move those down into the green where we're reducing the risk there. So for this example, and this was a real example of a risk that came out of our CNA work, or our level 2 risk assessment. So one of the failure modes, potential failure modes that was identified was if in the rare event that you had a large flow over the emergency spillway, and if that flow were to create a lot of erosion that actually created enough of a blockage in the river downstream that you backed water up into the power plant and actually caused the power plant to flood, where you ruined the equipment and you had to take multiple years to replace that equipment. So one of the risks, very low likelihood that this would happen, but still, this is in that band where we want to do something about it. So what we did was we then implemented a project that put improvements into the plant so that if you get water coming back up into the plant, you can seal the plant off much more effectively than we've been able to do in the past. And so in doing that, we now, as we think about this risk, well, it's much less likely that that's going to be a problem, and so we're moving that risk. We're addressing it through that project. Now the risk, as we see it, it's now down in this further down into the left where we're less concerned about it. As a second example, this was another risk that was identified through one of the risk assessments we did with Oroville, was looking at the service spillway. And the concern was if high flows going over the spillway, if you could get cavitation that would start eroding the concrete to the degree where you had concrete failing. And this was identified as, well, that's a potential risk. And again, very unlikely, but the consequences of damage to that structure were so great, it's plotting in an area where it says, okay, that's one that we need to look at here. So what we did with that one, this type of cavitation spillways, it's difficult from an engineering standpoint to model for computers or physical models. There are not a lot of spillways like this that in the world that you can observe. So it was a pretty extensive study, research effort, looking at the handful of other dams in the world that have this kind of facility, did this with a lot of engagement from FERC, and did a lot of really new cutting edge modeling here. The result of all of that was that this problem that folks thought maybe could occur really ruled that out. We really don't have the mechanisms for this kind of problem to occur. So with this engagement from FERC, looking at this risk, we've been able to remove that risk from our list of things that we're watching there. Yes?
It's really not really a question, but I want to make a comment here that you actually mentioned the issue where you had a backflow possibly coming into the power plant. And what maybe I'm going to stay here because as we went through the power plant, your staff did a Herculean effort to sandbag that, and those guys worked around the clock to make sure that didn't happen. So I want to make that comment here that your staff need to be complimented for doing that. It's something none of us really knew about until we did a little tour of the plant, and it's a big attaboy. Good job.
Yeah, well, thank you. And this work here was really reducing that risk even further is then setting up that facility. So instead of having to come in and do all of that emergency sandbagging, it's much quicker. So we're much more reliable, or we're much more confident in our ability to reliably protect the plant, which is why we're now, see that as being a smaller risk than it was when we had to do that Herculean effort there. But yeah, thank you for that comment. Okay, so to keep moving here, so again, trying to say we use that concept of risk. So now we've done that. We've come up with, here's a list of projects that here's the risks we're most worried about. Here's projects that we're going to do the best management of that risk. And so we need to now put those into a schedule, a plan that we can implement. And so we do that. We have a handful of different categories. We're going to end up with a list of projects, and we call it an A, B, C ranking. And so basically our top 10%, that's going to be our A projects. That's what we're going to focus on. Keep jumping around here. A projects, we're focusing on those. That's what we're most committed, wanting to get that work done in the upcoming year. That's the priority work. We have our B projects, which we're following on right behind, and then our C projects. So that's how, as we're going to implement the work, this is now our priority for implementing. There are projects that we've identified that we're not going to be able to add to this list because as every organization is doing, you're coming up with, there's a lot more things you could be doing than what you have the resources, what you're able to do. So work that we aren't able to do this year, next year, we're pushing to further years, so we're layering out those activities. But for the work we're doing this year, this is how we rank those. And so we're populating those projects there. We're cut with that list, different categories here on the left. So most of what's going to go in there is what came out of this risk assessment process, right? The risk, identifying which ones are most critical from a risk standpoint, that's probably a good 80–85% of the work we're going to do is coming out of that process.
If I may, I'd like to ask a couple questions.
Yeah.
How's the process changed since the powerhouse burned down, the river valve mistake, and a spillway failure? Have you changed the process of risk analysis substantially? And I want to follow that up. is there a larger budget for preventive maintenance?
So the process that, the risk assessment we did with Oroville, the level 2 risk assessment, the CNA work, so that was a pilot effort that FERC was doing, that kind of risk assessment that then now they're rolling out nationwide. So that level of risk assessment and that systematically approaching it, that's new. That was done like 2021. So that systematic looking at risk across all the facilities.
So it's an
is new.
improvement.
And then
We only have history to rely on. So, and it's not
Yeah.
personal. You know me. It's not personal. It's just we have history to rely on as a community, and there is a safety issue here. So it substantially has changed the way you look at risk analysis. But the follow-up is, are you getting enough money to fix things before they fail?
And the way we look at that is, so yes, go through all this project, we come up with a
I
bunch
want to
of work.
interject something.
Yeah.
But you have a prioritizing thing. We're worried about the Oroville Dam. What if there's a canal down south that's flowing backwards and you want to fix it now? If you don't have enough money to do both, you're going to do one. And so my point is, can you be honest and say you are not getting enough money to do everything you think needs to be done, or do you have to be careful?
So
or
for-
don't answer the question.
For that specific example, so on our risk
It's
table there.
not personal.
No, absolutely. It's a very valid question on how would we trade these off. So a water supply issue compared to a life safety issue, the way our staff, as they look at that, our managers, our executive, the way that's looked at is the water supply risk, that scores up to this point, life safety, right? That's what's going to show up as the highest risk. So that just, the mechanics of how our tool works, that's how that happens. But the other part is just as we are looking at the work we're doing, what we're looking at is, are we addressing those highest risks? And it's the life safety risk or what's going to create the highest concerns. And so that's what's focusing us on those activities there.
Thank you.
And John, two points or questions. One is we talk a lot about the CNA, so maybe just break that down into a paragraph.
Yes.
What it means, and then why it's new post the spillway incident.
Yeah, so with the comprehensive needs assessment, and so that was an effort to look at, after the spillway, look at Oroville, all the different aspects of the facility, and then go through this risk process to say is there anything across the facility, any risks that we need to identify so that then we can implement something to address those. And that was the effort that we did with Senator Nielsen, Assemblymember Gallagher as co-chairs, and Supervisor Connolly, you as part of that group as well there. And so went through that effort. In parallel, also did a separate risk assessment so we could compare these to look at the facility and then guide our work moving forward.
Got it. So that was a much deeper, broader dive into what are all the needs of the reservoir and dam, and it sounds like now that's being rolled out nationwide. But I think just to put a real fine point on the supervisor's question, and tell me if I get this wrong, Supervisor, the historic concern has been, would a specific life safety risk not get funded because the state water project has needs elsewhere in the system, including those needs for water supply?
And no, we would, all of our life safety risks we have.
I have to add, you got to reassure us you're finding them before they happen. That's the difference. I mean, you could inspect that down like you inspect aircraft. They rarely fall out of except recently, doors are falling off. But, Boeing stock went down. I'm sorry, I digress. But you know what I'm saying? You assure me that you've changed the way you do it so I can tell people that this is a much better process, and then you're going to prioritize the safety. Is that all right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, this is exactly the kind of candid talk we want at the commission. Supervisor.
Yeah, John, hey, thanks for that report. And I just wanted to reiterate what my colleague, Supervisor Connolly said. Because we're right in Lake Oroville's in our backyard, I think we have a greater concern as to safety issues than someone downstream in the State Water Project. So are these priorities, first of all, is there a way of getting a list of the priorities, or is that proprietary to your organization?
So we, a few slides down, I have,
Okay.
here are the 8 projects for Oroville. We didn't put in the presentation, here are all the
Okay.
top priority projects across the system there, just because it gets to be really long there. But, no, we'd really like you to see what, okay, going through all of this, here's what, this year, what we're working on with Oroville. And
Yeah,
then,
and I guess and I'd love to see a list of the priorities if it's available. And also, are most of those on that list, are they north of the Delta, or is this also considered part of the whole State Water Project? And would some of these priorities be south of the Delta?
so again, if wherever we see life safety, right, we're addressing that. We've got about 20% of the A, our priority projects are up here in the Oroville area. And again, there's a handful of reasons why we're going to do work in a particular year there. The risk aspect is part of it. There are also other projects that we're going to do where if we're mandated to do it from somewhere, that'll factor in there. Or we call them on the slide the value-based project. So that's like our asset management program, where we wouldn't do that work necessarily out of a risk assessment, but it's really important work because the asset management program, how we set up this process for scoring risk, how we do the inspections, how we're systematic and structured in doing inspections, the improvements there, that effort, right, we need to make sure we're doing that. So that's how we make sure we're adding that work into our work plan.
Okay. And you just get back to my original question, is there a list, a list that we can see? And then we could also say, hey, have you thought about this one? You know, have you thought about this thing? So,
Yes,
and maybe you're getting to that.
I'm getting
Okay,
there.
I apologize then, thanks.
Can I, wait,
Yeah, please.
so, and I don't know where this fits in, if it really is for you or for somebody else following, but I want to know on a basometer issue, I realize we installed 13. Those are mostly under the spillway, correct?
And on the piezometer, we're going to have Dave's going to talk about that one in a moment here, so we could.
Are they going to bring that up later? I can certainly. Okay. I'll follow up on this question. And then the other question I had was, you know, we've talked about it a few different times about a possible alternate spillway, lowering the water level in the reservoir before major storm events. Where are we at on that? I think that's a really tough animal to sell, but do you guys have any ideas on that?
So here's what I would suggest. I want to make sure the supervisor gets his question answered. Why don't you work through the rest of your slides? Let's bring Dave up. I think that you're going to address at least one of them, and then we'll make sure that supervisor, your questions get answered.
Later. That's fine.
Yeah, no, it's good. Thank you for flagging them.
All right, that sounds like a great approach here. So to keep moving here, so we're coming up with our list of activities for this year, the next year, and so what we're not able to do is just then we get this punch list and we don't have generalists that can just go work through it. Each of these are going to require different skill sets. So even if when we bring a contractor in, we've got to do spec writing, construction management, contract management. We have a variety of different types of engineers. Each of these projects is going to need different skill sets at different times. So now that here's this list of work that we're focusing on, we got to then tie it to all the different resources. And so this is not intended not a picture I wanted to go through in detail with everybody. I just wanted to show this is what that process starts to look like. This is looking at each of these different pairs of columns think of them as a different group of DWR resources, a different skill set. So like one column would be our electrical engineers. So then we're layering in these different activities. So we're starting with our annual work, which would be the red colors. We're layering in different projects there on top. And so we're making sure that each project's going to need a certain number of hours of different skill sets, that we've got those folks available. And so there's a big timing component here that goes into how we come up with this plan. So the point of this is just to hopefully help convey that there's a lot of different parts here. It's a fairly complex process of working through, but the idea of the process, again, is we're starting with this annual work. We're putting in the A projects next. then the B, then the C, so that we're, again, prioritizing that list of top 10 projects. All of that work then comes out where we have a work plan for the next year and for the following year. For DWR and Supervisor Kimbleshoe, this kind of gets to your question. We have 327 projects that we're planning across the state. We have 62 of those in Oroville. And so, and again, as we're, 10% are the A projects, so we've got 6 are A for Oroville and so on there.
Thank you.
And this is then, so what are those 6 projects? And so just to walk
Can
through.
you remind us in a sentence what an A project is?
Absolutely. A project is, we've gone through all of this process, and we've said, we've used risk to identify what's the most important work to do. So now we need to come up with what is that, the result of that process, what's our top projects that we're going to implement. And so a lot of that's from the risk. These are the couple categories. That comes into, here's the projects we're going to focus on. That's the kind of the end result of all of that prioritization. These are the priority activities. So for Oroville for this year, just looking at this, and so these are the different activities here. There's the this flood control outlet, the maintenance work, this capitalized project we did, and Dave's going to talk for a second about why that ended up here as an A project. The piezometer installation, getting that done. The McCabe Cove Cultural Resource Project. So this is related to all the wildfires, the debris loading, the debris coming into the reservoir. The way that's managed is that debris is taken to McCabe Cove. And so the concern is there are some cultural resources there, and want to make sure as we're moving that debris off the reservoir that we're not impacting those cultural resources. The reason it's an A project, not a big safety driver, it's really needing to get that work done in the near term, really focusing this year, because we're expecting here quite a big likelihood that we'll be needing to use that cove for that debris removal in the near term. The river valve outlet system is the main project that we're doing this year, the major one, and just you can see with the dollar amount. So adding the reliability to that low-level outlet of the reservoir, clear safety nexus there, making sure that that outlet is reliable, and so why that one is here on our A project list. And then electrical vehicle restoration, electrical vehicle charging station. So not a safety project, but that's where we have an executive order to move our state fleet to more electrical vehicles. And so hitting the milestones there, really needing to get that work done this year. So again, an example of work we prioritize each year, not always a safety. There are other things that we're also having to prioritize because of the timing. But again, as we look at the dollar amounts, we can see that the safety-related ones are dominating the list there. And then the last would be the water treatment upgrades at the hatchery. So that takes us through our process there, and I will maybe at this point hand it over to Mr. Sarkeesian, and I'll say here if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to add to Supervisor Connolly's question, because sort of the question beneath the question there. So one of the things that's been really important for the State Water Project is recent legislation that provided the department with more contracting tools and some permit streamlining for State Water Project rehabilitation only. And Supervisor, this reflects the fact that, projects, this big, tend to have, as we manage our assets, there are moments when we have more work than we can do, and there isn't the, sort of broad social and political support for vastly increasing government resources, staffing to do that work. That's where these tools, Senator Dale staff has been just so important coming from the legislature to make sure the department has all the tools necessary to keep up with the workload so that we can be responsive, particularly in a risk and public safety setting. So I just want to make that point because we do need those things to occur, particularly some of the permit streamlining on the rehabilitation projects for the State Water Project.
Thank you for the update. When I checked, this wasn't online. Can we get this PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then I would say it could be a good idea to institutionalize an update around the priority list, the projects, Supervisor Kimmelshoe, so that, there was, part of what we could use this commission for is the update on an annual basis for those prioritized projects. I think it'll be important.
Great,
Think
appreciate
that'd make a lot
that.
of sense. All right, Mr. Sarkisian.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Dave Sarkisian. I manage our State Water Project Dam Safety Program. And so maybe first off, the piezometer questions. Yeah, we've got piezometers underneath the spillway that were installed during the reconstruction. We're watching those. They're automated, so we get to see those online every day. They don't react to the spillway release. They don't react much to reservoir elevation. Some do react to rain. So that's all good news, telling us that we've got a very watertight spillway, so to speak.
And then just in a sentence, what's a piezometer, just to make sure I'm bringing everybody along?
Sure, it's an instrument that's embedded, in the foundation beneath the spillway, measuring pore water pressure or groundwater. And so we want to see it obviously correlate to things like rain rather than a spillway release. We've got some under the flood control outlet monoliths, the gated monoliths up top. We installed those through the piers in, I think it was 2021. And pretty much the same situation. As we operate the spillway, we're not seeing spikes, which is good. We've got one that does react to rain, and none of them really react to the reservoir elevation. So again, good news that we don't have elevated pore pressures underneath that structure, creating an uplift condition, which would be undesirable. We installed the toe piezometers in the dam a couple years back as well, and those also react very much to rain, with just all that rain that hits the dam and gets down to the toe of the dam. The ones we're still working on, or trying to wait for the right conditions, are in the grout galleries and the core blocks, so kind of on the insides of the dam. And as part of our drilling plan, we went through our regulators, Division of Safety Dams and Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We can only install those when the lake's at 780 and falling. And so that's just a safety measure, so that if we did encounter any high pressures while drilling, they should be far less, when the lake is low. And so I don't even think we'll get to install those this year, considering the water year we're having. I don't think there'll be a window of opportunity where we'll be below 780 this fall. But if it does appear, we'll do our best to get those installed. I guess the other topic that I just wanted to touch upon is improvements to the program overall. So I manage our entire dam safety program. I am looking at all of our 26 state water project dams up and down the state. I look at that portfolio and I'm making decisions on all those dams, not just the Oroville facilities. We've also, just improvement-wise, since the spillway incident, really the institution of risk like we have with the matrix and the estimates, that's relatively new. And that's an improvement that was both driven by FERC, but also a desire by our program to adopt that approach to help make decisions about where we invest our money. We also received positions back in 2018, 2019, and have made a lot of programmatic improvements to our program, and so I'd be happy to talk about those in the future if desired. Yeah.
Just a quick comment. You talked about the piezometers. You might mention that the original ones installed in the dam no longer work, if I'm correct about that.
Correct.
So that's the other reason why we're putting new ones in. It's not because of a new issue. It's the old ones failed.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah. So a lot of that was part of the comprehensive needs assessment work as well, identifying locations to replace abandoned instrumentation.
Good.
Okay.
Do you have an idea of how many you're looking at putting in a dam itself? There's 52 originally, right?
Yeah. So I believe it's 8 or 9 we have planned to install. Some in the grout gallery, and they'll go into the abutments, and then some farther down in the core block, kind of into the foundation of the dam, and then one that'll be actually in the dam embankment. And so that'll give us a better picture of pore water pressure in those different zones of the dam.
So then this is just a preliminary number that we put in, and we'll analyze the data on those as well and figure out if we need more or not?
Yeah, and they were really a lot of review from a lot of external experts as well as our regulators, buying into this plan and absolutely recognizing that we need to install them, get several years of data, and then make some decisions about whether we need additional instruments as well.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so as a program manager, I have funds that I control that I can decide to put forth on projects. And I end up having to decide at the end of the day which gets to be an A project, a B project, or project, which within my program and my funding. Even a C project that's getting funding in 2024 or 2025 should execute. It's getting money, it should execute. To me, when I mark something an A project, it's saying to my peers and my management, we got to get this done. We got to make sure the resources are there to make sure the project stays on track and the resources don't go to something else. And so that's really kind of my perspective. And so example number one here is our spillway maintenance project. We've been inspecting the spillway every year. In 2022, we determined that there was enough work there that we wanted to have a contractor do it and kind of specialized work. And so we started developing drawings and specifications in a contract. As we were doing that in 2023, we had that bumper year, over 2.4 million acre feet of water passed through that spillway. That's about 2/3 of the lake. We topped out, peak outflow was 36,000 CFS in March of 23. The other factor in our mind was that with that RVOS rehabilitation project that John had mentioned, that causes Hyatt to be shut down for a period of time as we bring equipment and materials in through the tunnel. And so the spillway is needed to maintain flows to the diversion pool in the river while Hyatt is off. And so there's an extra demand on the spillway. And so we wanted to make sure this work got done. Also recognizing that we only have certain periods of the year we can do work on the spillway, right? We don't want to do it in the winter or spring. We want to do it late summer, fall. And so by making this an A project, it really was my message to my peers that are providing resources to the project that we need to get this done. We need to make sure your people stay on top of it. We also made this a multi-year contract so that knowing that we'll be able to come back, and that gives us some efficiencies to bring back the same contractor and continue work in the next couple years. Example B project is our Oroville Dam emergency spillway studies. And so this is focusing on the risks associated with further erosion downstream of the existing apron. And so I've got the matrix there, and those diamonds represent damaged states, meaning like kind of financial damage or financial consequences for different scenarios on the emergency spillway. And then the oval is another scenario where there is some life loss. And so all those symbols are kind of related to the emergency spillway and the level 2 risk of results. And so we did receive a letter from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission requesting further study of the spillway, and that in association with where these risks plot got us moving on this project. And the goal is to better define the conditions and our understanding of the emergency spillway performance with the existing improvements. That work is ongoing right now. We've got a team developing the geologic model. We've got a series of hydrographs or flows we're going to pass over the spillway in the modeling and assess the erodibility. And then once we have that work done, we will meet with and convene a workshop with FERC and other experts to evaluate the specific risks associated with that erosion. And so that would be a quantitative risk analysis, very similar to what was done for the aeration topic. And when we really focus in on those risks in a very detailed manner, we're able to come to better decisions, both, I think, ourselves, but also with our regulators, that we end up on the same page and are able to make a decision that both organizations feel good about progressing and moving on. An example C project. So again, this is being funded, but this is one where if we had to pull the resources, something happens, some A project needs more resources, or there's some other event, this is one, as a program manager, I would be okay with, okay, let's give up those resources, go to that more important project, and this one can sit for a little while. And so this is a Palermo Canal lining improvements identified through the comprehensive needs assessment, and it's a very simple, straightforward project to improve the canal lining, reduce the leakage, and that should reduce any potential for landslides or instability above Hyatt Power Plant and the switch yard. And so we've got our final drawings, specifications, and quality control plan was submitted in March of 2023. And we actually got some comments, I think it was in October, and so we're resubmitting our design package for approval, I believe, probably this week or next week. You can see the matrix there. This was a risk that was in the light green, based on the level 2 risk analysis results, but it's such a straightforward project and very typical easy work that I wanted to get this one moving, and it should be a very low cost as well. And so moving on this project would get some risk reduction very early on this topic. Yes?
One thing I wanted to mention too, that this canal relining also, the potential of it leaking and creating a landslide also protects the South Feather Water Power Plant, which is just downstream. And I know you don't need to include it, but for South Feather Water, I'll speak up there, very thankful that that be done, because that's one of their major power plants just downstream and nicely protected. This canal is right over it, so thank you.
Yep. So hopefully these examples kind of illustrate from a program manager's perspective, how I'm making decisions about the importance or prioritization of projects within my world, dam safety projects. I'd also note that, we identify a lot of risks. We identify solutions. And my staff come to me with a project, and I say, okay, start working it, start developing the scope. It's very important that really the scope, the budget, the schedule for the project is well understood, well defined before we launch it and fund it, because otherwise the project's not set up for success. And so that's another factor, is making sure that when I'm assigning funding or agreeing to funding that staff is proposing, I have a level of confidence, my management has a level of confidence that we're going to execute the project per the plan. And so that's very much, we call it project readiness. Is the project ready, for the funding to execute? So that's another factor that isn't necessarily captured in a risk matrix or in a big spreadsheet or table of projects. But it's very, very important to us to make sure that we really feel like we have a good plan and the project's set up for success.
Yeah. Mr. Bain.
That was very interesting and gave us a lot of information. I think that we raised a lot of questions regarding the way that risk is assessed, and we're not really comfortable with the CNA process, which was largely internal and didn't bring a lot of external views. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be a good idea to have a meeting with particularly you to go through some of our detailed questions and get answers which are more fundamental. Because I can't believe that the risk of the emergency spillway causing a blockage in the river is in the range of 1 in 10,000 years or whatever it was. I mean, it seems to me that if you use that spillway, and it may happen, particularly if unexpected things happen, if there will be blockage, and you won't be able to avoid it. And the risk of that would seem to me, and I think many other people, in the much nearer 150 or something like that, because it's happened once, and if the similar conditions come again, it will happen again. And the things like that, which we'd like to explore further. And I wonder if we couldn't set up a meeting, as we did with the inundation maps, to try to get a bit further into the bottom of this.
I'll leave it to the commission or management to, opine on meeting. But the CNA, you're right, that was done by a group of consultants and DWR participants. The process that we do now with FERC, and that's through their Part 12 process, is like the Oroville Level 2 risk analysis, where subject matter experts external to the department are there to provide estimates. FERC is there to oversee the process, make sure it follows their guidelines. And it's a wider group of people making estimates. And so at least moving forward, the process will absolutely have external subject matter experts.
But reading some of the correspondence with FERC, it seems that they share some concerns about the processes and how risk is dealt with. And I just think this will be a very good topic for some sort of side discussions.
Commissioner, I think we can go ahead and get that meeting arranged. I think it's better to have opportunities for a deep dive.
and I want to hear from Supervisor Connolly, but I'll make an observation, which is, I think this is really strong progress and there's more work ahead. Clearly, there are complicated factors that you all are assessing. You're bringing, voluminous data to these assessments. One important conclusion I draw is part of the risk analysis is to ensure that we're identifying those projects that have greatest risk for public safety, so that those projects are clearly the top of the list prioritized, and that this risk assessment doesn't trade off public safety for water supply or public safety for the cost of the project. So that's a conclusion, but I still think it's complicated and it's a little hard to follow, and you guys have done a good job breaking this down, but I think Mr. Bateman's follow-up meeting will be helpful. I also think to the extent that this commission continues to do its work, it'll be helpful to institutionalize some type of update so that as we learn, how you're assessing risk each year, we can understand what are the projects that are prioritized, why are they prioritized, sort of what are the risk assessments for those projects. Because if I'm a elected supervisor, I want to make sure that my constituents understand what are the projects that are being prioritized and why are they being prioritized. So I think that'll be helpful. Supervisor.
I'd like to thank you very much for saying that we should have this meeting. I think what you miss is the culture that you're under is it's monolithic. When we did all these reports, it was all ex-DWR people, mostly, and Mr. Bateman has a brilliant mind, and we meet with some other people. They're much smarter than me on technicalities, and they may have an input or a concern. Maybe the concern is ill-gotten, and you can say, oh, that doesn't matter because of this scientific reason, or they may have a concern you missed. And I think that's why you should meet with us. Not for me, but for the minds of these other gentlemen that I do meet with that have read, they spend hours and hours reading through the reports, and they really know this stuff forward and backwards, and their input could be valuable. Thank you, Mr. Crowfoot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole goal of this commission is to improve understanding and transparency on the management of the dam and the reservoir. And, we're in our meeting 16. We've come a long way. We obviously continue to have more work to do. So I appreciate this update. I think it's helpful to understand the assessment you all use. Thank you for the work you do. And I think this follow-up meeting will be helpful. And then moving forward, figuring out a way that we can, as we all learn more about your decision-making process, get an update as those annual decisions get made. So you can come, you can explain what's on the prioritization list. Our elected representatives can ask questions. I think that's going to go a long way towards trust and confidence.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So let's hear our next presentation, specifically focused on the projection of expenditures, the funding for the State Water Project and how it impacts the Oroville Dam and Reservoir.
All right. Good morning. My name is Hong Lin. I serve as a state. Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? All right. Good morning, everyone. Great seeing you all here in person. My name is Hong Lin. I serve as the State Water Project Financial Managers, and thanks for this opportunity here again to share with you on the State Water Project budget and our annual planning process. Just a quick refresher, State Water Project annual revenue is over $1 billion, and the revenue primarily comes from the 29 State Water Project contractors. And we operate the joint use facilities with Central Valley Project that's owned by the USBR, Bureau of Reclamation. So we got cost share. We receive the reimbursement revenues from the USBR. And we do have power revenues, and that's contribute to our annual revenue. Last but not least, for our we do receive a certain amount of the general fund under the Davis-Stallwick Act for the recreation, fish, and wildlife enhancement projects. And use these funds mainly for the State Water Project annual operation and maintenances, and we use these funds to pay our annual debt service, which are to fund our capital projects. And our capital project planning and on an annual basis, average is around 300 million. And you heard from the previous speakers, really the resources limitation is human resources. Actually, in the previous, only the last year, we actually, because of the river outlet project, we achieved over 300 million capital project expenditures. And typically, it's a little bit below 300 because of the human resources limitations. And I will touch upon a little bit about the department's efforts in significantly enhancing our financial management and reporting. This is also very important for really sharing this information with all the interested parties, the public, as well as all the stakeholders. This chart is showing a historical state water project cost in the last 10 years. One thing, as you can see here, over the years, definitely the cost has exceeded $1 billion. And one thing I want to highlight here is for 2017 and 18, most of these projects, as you can imagine, these are related to the Oroville project cost. However, in this chart, we did not include, these are only the costs that the state water project bonded, or the capital cost is we sell the bond. So those costs, that FEMA reimbursement is not included. So I just want to highlight that. And as you can see here, these chart and the different color is really focused from the cost recovery perspective. What we highlight at the blue at the base, those are the minimum costs. Minimum means just the annual cost we collected from the contractors, mainly for operation maintenance. Capital, that orange color, those are the capital costs, and those are capital planning. We fund for the capital cost, but in terms of the debt service, that's different here. And the darker blue bar there, those are the variable. Variable, those are power cost. And every year we purchase power, we also generate power. So these bar chart here is just showing our power purchase cost. And there's, as you can see here, 2023, no surprise, we have a large power cost because we have 100% allocation. At the very top, there's a small portion there, and those portions are not recovered from the state water project contractors, and those are what I have mentioned earlier. Those are for the fish and wildlife enhancement, recreation, proportions, and some of those are some special arrangement, for example, for the water quality. Those has a small portion at the very top. As mentioned earlier, our planning is really a multi-year planning. Our budget process, and here as outlined here, is a 2-year rolling budget. There are a lot of terms. What I want to highlight is we're now in 2024, that's what we consider the budget year, and 2025, that's what we've already sent out the contractors, the bills to the contractors, as John had mentioned earlier. And really this planning process, and even at this time for the 2024 operation, as you can see from the chart underneath, what is showing we're in we're in March 2024 now. We just started our process to preparing our statement of charges or the bills to the contractors for next year. So there's a lot of work involved in that. The planning actually was from last year. And meanwhile, if you're looking at later this year, once we finish preparing the statement of charges for next year, and we will be collecting the information, starting our next planning cycle to prepare the bills to the contractors and for the following year. So our bills, state water contractor bills, need to be sent out by July 1st. And each of the year, there's 2 distinctive process. One is preparing the bills, and the second phase is really, as mentioned earlier, from the project program, and they start planning for the future years. And typically in December, that's where the state water project, all the projects program managers, and we convene, we review our planning for future years. And I also want to highlight this significant progress the department has made since 2014 to enhance our financial management processes. And what I'm highlighting here is a couple of the phases of this project called FMEP. FMEP represents Financial Management Enhancement Program. The first system that we implemented is back in 2019. This system, it's really a department-wide, a system called SAP Budgeting and Planning, SBP. This is really a department-wide system to budget, to plan our resources and budget projects, programs, including the state water project, and this also sync with the governor's budget. The system went live in 2019. In 2020, this is an important system that we implemented in 2020, project called Portfolio Project Management and Resource Management, PPM-RM. You've heard all those project ranking and all the programs, annual programs, over 300 projects, all those information in the central system. This system is really essential for our daily operation. For me as a financial manager, if I want to know all the project, I can go into the system, find the project, find the risk evaluation, find the project status, budget, resources. So this is really essential for state water project. And in 2022, we implemented the third phase. The system is called Cost Allocation Billing, or CAP system. This is an important system. This system is enhancement for our previous cost and billing. This system is mainly used for allocating all the state water projects throughout the reaches, throughout the facilities, eventually produce the statement of charges, which are the bills to the contractors. So accurately reflecting those throughout the reaches, conservation, through this system is very important. And also the system is really built with robust quality control, its accountability and transparency. I want to highlight, and the currently state water project is under contract extension amendment. As of January 1st, 2024, we have transitioned to the new billing provisions terms. And this is really important because previously the state water project contract ends in 2035. And now with this contract extension, it's extended the contract with the contractors to 2085. So what's the significance of this is really help us to relieve the cost compression so we can go to the market and sell long-term bond beyond 2035. So that's really a critical milestone for the department. And we're currently working on the last phase of the financial enhancement. It's called business intelligence, cross-module reporting. And this one is, as I mentioned, it's very important for the department to communicate with all interested parties here, our divisions, program managers, but also with the public. This last phase is really developing and linking the different modules I have mentioned earlier and help the internal team can better manage project and also communicate with external teams, external interested parties on the cost and the cost allocation. So this project, we anticipate the first phase will be completed sometime in 2025, and there's actually a second phase probably will be extending towards the end of 2025. I also want to highlight back in 2023, we completed a budget policy. It is really highlighting the roles, responsibilities of the program project managers so they can make sure they allocate their resources meeting what mentioned the A project, really from those financial perspective, and we need to make sure all resources, including the financial resources available to complete those A projects as well. This pie chart
and then I would say just Hong, I'm conscious of time, so you can move through this pretty quickly and then just identify where, relevance to the Oroville investments.
Yep, absolutely. So just really quick, this is a pie chart showing the overall state water project. We have minimum cost, capital cost, and variable cost, and some of the direct billing. I want to highlight the power cost. As you heard from earlier, the power cost is planned with a specific group. Doesn't go quite through the entire process, but power cost is a significant cost for the state water project. So this is a summary for the Oroville expenditures. You've seen these charts in the past. I want to highlight, we added the calendar year 2023 expenditures. As you can see here, the large capital expenditures is mainly due to the river valve outlet project. And moving forward for calendar year 2024 and 2025, for our annual operation maintenance, those type of project, annual reoccurring, as well as some of those studies. And for moving forward 24 and 25, we're looking at about 55 million. And for the capital projects, the cost is somewhere around 40 million for 2024, and for 2025 is around 34 million. So overall, the numbers, the overall Oroville expenditures or cost planning is still above, in that 90 million and above ranges. So the quick summary here is our financial management is transitioned into the contract extension. I heard previously, really the financing, this is really important for the state water project. Now we have the financing, we can afford the long-term, some of these large capital projects because we can sell 35-year bond instead of being bonded by, we have to pay off by 2035. So this is very important. Second one is we will continue to work with our project program managers to improve our planning. And it's important to really meet our goals, and so we can really prioritize those projects and financing from a long-term perspective. A strategic asset management mentioned earlier, this is really important for financial management. If as a financial manager, I know what's the needs, the capacity, and then we can range the different financing mechanism, whether it's a loan program, whether it's a system revenue bond, or we could also seek some of the federal funding, federal grants as well. Last but not least, it's very important, we're here to communicate with the public, and thanks again for this venue to share this information with you all.
Hong, thank you so much, and I think really helpful, and again, it's incredible to understand the complexity of the project planning across 26 different reservoirs and hundreds of miles of conveyance. I would say this, which is moving forward, to me, having now been in all these meetings, the crux of the question that we need to answer from state agencies is, do we understand the risks at this facility? Are we prioritizing the projects to address those risks? And are we spending enough money to get those projects done? So that's not a question, but I think and this is helpful, but moving forward, I think annualizing these updates so that we understand, the project priorities, how they address risk, and whether we've got adequate funding to address those risks. Because I think we want to use this to really make sure that, our local leadership is confident that we understand those risks, we're prioritizing the projects, and then we're funding those projects.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Mr. Bateman.
Add to that, I wonder if we could add a couple of items to our meeting. A couple of items to our meeting. One of the problems is that the studies and how they're funded, which we asked questions about, and the studies are important, and how do the studies themselves, for instance, the erodibility study, how does that get initiative, and how is it done, and what budget there is for that, and secondly, what budget there is for the Department of Safety of Dams, and where they interact with the whole decision-making process. And if we could add that to the group, to the subjects that we're going to be discussing in a meeting, I think it fits well with the risk side of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'll say that for all of our commissioners, before the end of our meeting, we're going to ask for additional suggestions around topics to raise, to schedule at our coming meeting. So have that in the back of your head. But Commissioner, you've raised two very specific suggestions, and we'll put those in the action tracker. Again, I think we're making great progress unpacking what maybe has felt to some like a black box of decision-making. And I know DWR wants to be and is being transparent about that. There's just a lot of complexity to unpack. So Commissioner, we'll make sure that those elements are discussed at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to do a time check because public comment is critically important, and we also want to discuss this, any suggestions for future meetings. Lori, I know you're going to give a presentation on the emergency preparedness and planning. So I'd ask you if you can keep this presentation high level to less than 10 minutes. And then if there are topics that we need to park and discuss at a future meeting, we can. And then we'll move quickly to public comment to ensure that we've got that time. And then we'll finish up with suggestions for coming meetings.
Thank you, Secretary. I'm glad to be here today to talk to you about the whole community coordination and collaboration that we do in emergency management in California. And while I will talk from a Cal OES perspective, it's really a statewide perspective. And if, oh, that's right. Where do I, there we go. I'd like to start here. Any discussion of emergency management in California has to understand the framework, and that is the standardized emergency management system. As you can see here, whether it be at the field level with our first responders, local government, operational areas, the region, or the state, we all do emergency management the same way. We utilize the incident command structure, we use the same or similar terminology, and that's across all of those levels. Also, our motto there, all disasters start and end at the local level, is really what the system is founded on. So the field is the first to respond. If their capabilities are exceeded, then they'll reach up to the city level. If theirs are exceeded or will appear to be exceeded soon, it'll go up to the county, to the region, and then up to the state. We try not to skip levels, but some may be triggered simultaneously. So when we talk about whole community, I wrote up here whole community partners. There are obviously more, but I wanted to make sure that we were all operating under the same thought process here of who we mean when we're talking about whole community. I've kind of divided this into preparedness, response, and recovery, but I'll really focus more heavily on how we work together to prepare for disasters. At Cal OES, we do statewide planning. We do review and approve all dam EAPs, emergency action plans. We work very closely with the Division of Safety of Dams at DWR, and we also do county EOP reviews. In fact, Butte County review was done last year. We do state emergency plan, which is the framework for the entire state. We do the catastrophic planning, which are those really big regional disasters. In those, we tend to bring in a lot of whole community partners, FEMA, other state agencies, counties, cities, tribes, special districts, private sector, utilities, and other critical infrastructure owners, non-governmental organizations, and CBOs, community-based organizations. We offer training at Cal OES through the California Specialized Training Institute to state and local emergency management professionals, law enforcement, firefighters, other hazmat professionals, urban search and rescue, task forces, utilities, our CERT members, I'll talk about those in a moment, and other volunteers. Here in Butte County, last year we conducted 8 courses in emergency action planning, intermediate and advanced incident command system, search and rescue, and hazardous materials. We do conduct exercises such as tabletops, functional exercises, and full-scale exercises, mainly with other state agencies, but sometimes with other public safety agencies. We're also working right now on a couple federal exercises, the ingestion pathway exercise for the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant that happens once every 8 years. We also do exercises with DWR. They have an annual notification exercise that comes through our State Warning Center, and they also do a functional exercise that we participate in. We also support local government in their exercises at their request. We have an Office of Access and Functional Needs that provides outreach and collaboration with whole community partners, generally through CBOs that work with people groups with access and functional needs. We have a private sector and non-governmental organization coordination office. Kind of neat, they work with large and small businesses, chambers of commerce, state trade associations, economic development agencies, universities, philanthropic organizations, faith and community-based organizations, and the voluntary organizations active in disaster, or VOADs, if you've heard that term thrown around before. And we'll talk in response some of the neat things that they do. Listos California is a grant program to CBOs to enable them to educate people about what they need to do to prepare for disasters. In recent years, we've actually been calling on some of our Listos grantees to help us to amplify important messaging to people that are in harm's way in disasters. And with our community emergency response teams, CERT, those are volunteer groups. There's over 450 in the state of California. I didn't look up to see if there are any here in Oroville or in Butte County.
We do have CERT.
But you do have it. Good job. And at Cal OES, we kind of do like overall state coordination and provide technical assistance to these teams and help them understand governmental procedures for disaster, as well as providing training opportunities. So when a disaster occurs, we'll activate the State Operations Center. It's full of Cal OES staff, other state agency representatives. The cast of characters changes depending upon the disaster. Right now we're in winter storms, so DWR is one of those partners that'll be first in, last out. And this helps us then to be able to move resources around the state as needed very easily, because we have decision makers in the room, in the SOC with us. We have an advanced planning unit. Again, during any flood operations, DWR is going to be in there with us for any geologic or seismic disasters. Natural Resources Agency, CGS, will be in there with us. We have a couple task forces that will automatically stand up no matter what the disaster. Our Priority Populations Task Force was created several years ago to ensure that we are really understanding and helping to communities that are more vulnerable to disaster than others. They work very closely with our advanced planning unit, who can kind of tell us kind of the direction that a disaster is taking a couple steps in advance, so we can make sure that we can move those resources around. We have that Business Operations Center, as I mentioned. They do some really neat things during a disaster. So for instance, I think during the 2017 North Bay fires, Dyson came to us. If you remember all of the smoke that we had and the air quality was incredibly poor, Dyson came to us with about 150 air purifiers and said, can you help us distribute this? Well, we don't accept things like that at Cal OES, but we can say, oh, such and such a county has requested them and send them there, or such and such a tribe has requested them for their community center and send them there. And so that's kind of what they do. They broker. We have our Cal OES regions. We have 3 of them in the state of California. I'm here with Tom Graham and Rick Ellert, who are from the inland region, which includes Butte County. And they have emergency services coordinators, or their staff kind of assigned to each county in California, so that they can go into emergency operations centers. They can provide liaison services to help the counties get the resources that they need during a disaster. And then we have 3 mutual aid systems: fire, law, and emergency management. So we can move these resources. Again, Cal OES is kind of like a broker in these situations where, you know, a county down south, maybe not experiencing a disaster, can send some fire engines or some law enforcement for evacuations to a county up here to assist them with that. And then, let me move on. Finally, in a recovery situation, there's a lot of ways in which we can help. There's some written down. I've used some acronyms: initial damage assessments. We can provide just-in-time training. We can help local jurisdictions set up local assistance centers. We can join in town halls and council meetings when you need help explaining to the public exactly what's going on with the emergency response. We have a safety assessment program where we can mobilize trained professionals to come and do building inspections, et cetera. We do set up joint field operations with FEMA whenever we have a presidential disaster declaration. And then this last bullet I threw on here, it's really hazard mitigation, the hazard mitigation grant program and the building resilient infrastructure and communities programs, grant programs. Those are federal. The California Prepare California Jumpstart program actually provides that match to those federal grants. It's oftentimes during the recovery phase that we really look at those things that we need to do and can do to mitigate the disaster, to make sure that our community doesn't go through it again. So that was a really quick whirlwind tour through how we as emergency managers, and I'm sitting here with some folks, some public safety folks who know just as well or more than I do on this topic. Happy to take any questions if there's time, Secretary. Otherwise, we're here afterwards. Come see one of the three of us. Thanks.
Huge thanks, Lori, and that was really impressive, getting that level of, that breadth of information out there in so quick a time, but I think really well organized. And of course, there's opportunities for deeper dives as we have them. Does any commissioner have any questions for Lori at this point?
Thank you.
All right. Huge thanks for the work that you do, and of course for our local law enforcement and first responder agencies. I want to next move to public comment. And as we always do, public comment is available for those who are here in person and also those joining us online. We'll first take public comment from those who are here in person, and we've asked to have public comment be limited to 3 minutes so we can make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. I think we've done a good job at these meetings ensuring that if there's a whole lot of questions, we can organize discussions or meetings after the formal commission meeting. And then once anyone in the room that's wanted to make public comment will move online. If you're watching online and you'd like to make a comment.
Secretary, we only have people in person today.
I'm so
Our
sorry.
apologies.
Okay, my apologies.
Yeah, that's our fault.
So then let's move ahead and ask if anybody has public comment they want to share. Yes, sir. You can come on up. Either one.
Hello, Secretary, members of the Commission. My name is Chris Fritz with Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency. I'm here today on behalf of Michael Bissett, our Executive Director, who fortunately couldn't make it in person today, but we did want to update the Commission on some of the mapping efforts that we have been working on related to inundation maps for the city of Oroville area. As part of a grant from DWR, our agency is analyzing and mapping the extent of inundation associated with various high flow releases from Oroville Dam. We, over the past month, have been meeting with various stakeholders with the county and city to understand the extensive inundation that occurred in 1997, which is important because we're using that information to refine the model, which is used to produce the results. And so we've received a lot of good feedback, and we're excited to report out that we are anticipating draft maps available here within this next month for further review and input by others. And so just wanted to update the Commission on those efforts and look forward to future discussions as that work is completed. Thank you.
Thank you for all the good work at the Flood Control Agency, and I would just say to commissioners, if we wanted to agendize an update on those inundation maps at a future meeting, looks like we're getting a thumbs up on that, so we should add that to the list for future updates. Thank you very much. Anyone?
I'd like to thank everyone for the efforts too. It's finding some things that need to be improved and allow better evacuations. Thank you.
I'll add too, the levee in Oroville, it was only built in 1913, so it's fine and well engineered, and no, we have about a mile worth of levee, and the city has engaged with Subutco to help us get a better take on it, and we just haven't really done anything since the dredging work that was done for the mining activities around the turn of the century. So it's a big deal to have that security. And I do appreciate all the public comment for the inundation maps, because we're really going on a lot of old historical photos and what people saw. And of course, it's a great thing to update. And when you look at the inundation maps and where they are, a lot of people bought homes and didn't realize, so now it's important to know that. And I appreciate Chris and Michael Bissett at that agency. They're a great bunch of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others who want to provide any public comment? Okay, then we have, oh, yeah, Mr. Mentek.
I was just waiting to make sure that any others that want to had a chance to go first. Really encouraged by today's presentation. I think they looked at a lot of the post-meeting questions and really answered what commissioners are looking for. Encouraged about how Hung talked about the financial management enhancement program, the transparency that's going to bring to the public. And because for a lot of time there has been that concern about money going towards Delta Tunnel studies, while safety was only getting 10% of the funds. But not just that, but not the money, but the human resources seems to be the limiting factor in so much of this. And I can't understand why funds to hire human resources for the water projects, which is such an important issue on both safety and delivery side, has political restrictions on it when it's being funded by contractors or water agencies that do that. I got 3 quick points.
Yeah, perfect, and then we'll respond.
Okay. One of the questions that we submitted was, under the new water contract, does DWR still retain the right to construct and charge the water contractors infrastructure projects that they deem necessary? We went through a 3-year process, came up with 10 different comprehensive needs assessment packages of facilities that would get us through the next 50 years. Since the water contract lasts 50 years, we should be looking at infrastructure that carries us into the 50-year project, and that's sort of what the comprehensive needs assessment did. It took a lot of previous FERC concerns and did that. And then if the department feels that package 4 is the best one to implement over the next 50 years, and it's a $2.5 billion project, if you take that and apply it to allocated water over the next 50 years, it comes out to like a 2% upcharge over a 50-year period. And now that we have the extended contracts, we can get the bonds that pay for that. So when these projects hit the financial analysis period, it should be viewed as only a 2% increase. My water and sewage just went up 20% upcharge. So to be asking those charges seems to be well within the ballpark. And before we give you a chance to answer that, Carla, back in 21, we asked for a lessons learned from the 86, 97 floods. And it was not fault finding, finger pointing. It was simply to say, let's take those lessons and make sure they find their way into the future water control manual. That question was asked again a couple of meetings back, and it made it to our action tracking log again. And I typed up some stuff that I think might help us jumpstart that process, although I think we're about 9 months too late, because they're ready to bring the draft water control manual to us in just a few months. And it's almost like they've already decided what the objectives and the alternative plans are before we've had a chance to input from the downstream level. So if I may approach and pass these out, we'll give Carla a chance to answer the first 2 questions.
Great, but Mr. Mentek, because we're almost concluding the meeting, do you want to share anything else? So then we're going to have Carla respond, and then we're going to move on. Make sense? Okay, great. Yeah.
So the department does have the ability to determine what projects we need and fund those projects and apply those to the statement of charges. That continues even under our new extended contract. On the first topic, one, I'll just apologize if I came across as a little bit flit there. We have increased staffing significantly in the past year and a half, by about 10%. We've hired another 150 people to work for the State Water Project to get this work done. So it's really the combination of that, plus these other new tools related to design build, related to construction management, related to more streamlined permitting, and it's the totality of those things that are helping the State Water Project meet this need that we have that was described today around reinvesting in the system with public safety as the first priority.
Very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Mentek.
Can I just make one point, which these questions which Matt raised, could we have answers to them from the DWR before we have the meeting with the Corps of Engineers?
So here's what I want to say yes. What I'm going to suggest, and first of all, huge thanks to DWR for having a series of meetings with Commissioner Bateman and Mr. Mentek and others to answer very specific questions. I think it's really important to answer those questions, and I think we recognize that this is a forum where we can't unpack all of those questions. So I know that earlier in the meeting there was a willingness from the DWR team to follow up and meet with Commissioner Bateman, which would presumably include Mr. Mentek, and to be able to ask and answer as many questions as you can. And then the commissioner is making a request to have that meeting as soon as possible to inform a meeting then that he's holding, follow-up meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers that's helping inform their deliberations on the flood control manual. So we're going to put that as a request to DWR, and hopefully they can meet that request.
Thank you.
Yeah. So here at the end of our meeting, we have a little under 10 minutes. I want to flag the topics that have been raised for subjects for future meetings, and then I'll open it up to commissioners who might have other topics they want to ensure get raised. So existing topics that we're planning on scheduling, one is an update on the FERC relicensing effort at the Oroville facility. That's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, obviously a big process, long-term process with a lot of consequence on the reservoir and dam. So update there. Also an update on recreation expansion and an update on recreation projects. So for Matt and our state parks partners, et cetera, update there would be helpful. I'll also mark that there's interest in an update on the inundation maps that Sabufka is developing. And I do think it could be helpful to have a second part of this discussion on project prioritization, and then specifically with these project priorities. And then Mr. Bateman's asked, or Commissioner Bateman's asked questions around how does entity like the Division for the Safety of Dams figure in, what level of external input is there in risk assessment. And then I think in that discussion, it would be helpful for DWR to propose an annualized process through this commission, which it would bring forward its priorities for the coming year so that there's a real discussion and clarity around what's being prioritized and funded. So those are all topics that can be addressed at future meetings, and I turn it over to any other commissioners that have suggested topics. Supervisor Kimmelshoe.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have another topic, but I do want to say, after coming to these meetings or being online for these meetings the last 3 years, this is the best one we've ever had. Because I think we're talking about issues now that really important to us, and in Northern California, we can take this information back to our constituents. So Secretary Crowfoot, Director Nemeth, thank you very much for continuing to come up here to our small town of Oroville and discuss these issues. I think it's been very beneficial for me. Hopefully the other commissioners feel the same. And I don't know if I can quote you directly on this, Secretary Crowfoot, but this is the reason that this commission was established, to talk frankly about the issues and transparently about the issues. So, and then to quote my colleague and elder statesman on the Board of Supervisors in Butte County, Supervisor Conley, none of this is personal. I mean, none of this is personal. We appreciate the work that the Department of Water Resources does, that your operation does, everybody does. And so we're just trying to get answers for our constituents. Would you say that's true, Bill?
You took my speech, thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Thanks for all the respect we're getting, thank you.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, I think let's make sure that these meetings focus on the crux. You know, I think we've covered a lot over 16 meetings, and it's been helpful. But I hear what you're saying, Supervisor, which is this set of questions that we unpacked today is really the most important. Because from, you know, what I hear, and I think it sounds like Director Namath by her nodding, what we hear is that you need the information to be able to provide to local residents to understand, you know, again, how are we focused on keeping people safe? What are we doing to keep people safe? And, you know, do we have the funding and other projects getting done to keep people safe? So, you know, maybe our next meeting, then we can prioritize the continuation of this discussion. And then it will be informed by this follow-up meeting that takes place outside of the commission. Commissioner Bateman, well, let's go to Supervisor
Yes,
Conant.
could you add water control manual to the list of topics?
Yes. The update on the Army Corps water control manual process, and that'll be helpful. And I'll acknowledge what the director said, which is we're thankful for the Army Corps' presentation the last meeting, but of course that's a huge issue, so it deserves another conversation. Supervisor.
So I would like Matt's comments be put in at items we keep looking at, as well as piezometers. And I know the alternate spillway thing is a really complicated issue, but we need to keep on that one as well.
Yeah. So what I hear is both potential discussion around lessons learned from the previous catastrophic flooding and how it's shaping decision-making, and then continued discussion, updates on the piezometers that are both operating and those that are planned for being installed.
Correct.
I'd like to reiterate that Matt has just a brilliant mind, and what he puts before us is well thought out, and we could all learn from it. And the next thing is, it's so important to have public input before the draft of the Army Corps manual is made, and these guys are way smarter than me, and they need to have time to make that input, so that local concerns are sometimes overlooked, but if we're part of the process, we'll be part of the solution. And it's just very important to do that first. Thank you. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Yeah.
It really means something that both of you are here.
Thank you very much.
Quick item,
Mayor.
and we'll be submitting it, but the city and some other agencies in Oroville have made some communications with FERC, and we'll include those for the FERC presentation for the next meeting. So we'll send you some correspondence and add to that presentation.
Excellent. Well, commissioners, thank you so much for being here and for all that you do. And again, remember that you're going to be sent this action tracker, which is updated around the discussions, the actions, the commitments that are being made in this meeting. And then I know that our colleagues at Kearns and West will keep this running list of topics to be discussed that will be scheduled out over the coming meetings. I'll leave it to Director Namath for the final word.
And PowerPoints will be online. That's a boring final word, but thank you.
They are online. Please check
Thank
now.
you.
And we'll have Nancy include them in her email to follow up.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll consider this meeting adjourned. Keep us safe.